Imagine for a moment that you're trying to reconstruct the biography of a ghost.
Okay.
You know this ghost existed. You have, like, all the receipts. Every major culture in the ancient neighborhood talked about them. The Greeks, well, they bought their alphabet from them. The Romans fought these apocalyptic wars against them.
Mm-hmm.
The Israelites learned how to build temples from them. But when you actually go to the ghost's house to hear their side of the story, the house is empty. Or, I guess more accurately, the house is rotted away.
That is a haunting. But yeah, a perfect way to describe the problem of the Phoenicians. It's the great silence of the Mediterranean.
It's so frustrating, right? I mean, you look at the Egyptians, they carved their theology into granite. That stuff is going nowhere. It's practically eternal.
Right.
Then you've got the Mesopotamians. They baked their receipts and their myths into clay tablets. Even if you burn the library down, you just bake the clay harder.
You make it more permanent, yeah.
But the Phoenicians, the absolute masters of the trade networks.
They were practical. Far too practical, maybe. They wrote on papyrus. And in the humid, salty air of the Levantine coast, what is now modern Lebanon and Syria papyrus it's ephemeral.
It just disappears.
It disintegrates. So for, 2,000 years, the Phoenicians were the lost voices. We knew them almost entirely through the lens of the people who, frankly, hated them.
Yeah, it's like we're reading their history in the bad Yelp reviews left by the Greeks, the Romans, and the Hebrew prophets.
And they were very bad reviews.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We're looking at a stack of sources that try to bypass those bad reviews. We are going to try and reconstruct the Purple Horizon. We want to understand the actual mythology, or what the source material calls the sacred technology, of these sea-ruling people.
And sacred technology is absolutely the key phrase here. Because for the Phoenicians, mythology wasn't just, entertainment. It wasn't just stories told around a campfire to pass the time. It was a survival mechanism.
Right.
This is a thalassocratic society, a society ruled by the sea. And they needed a way to navigate this very specific psychological state, something the sources call double liminality.
Okay, I want to bookmark double liminality because that sounds like a concept we absolutely need to unpack.
For sure.
But first, let's talk about our inside man. I mean, if all the papyrus rotted away, who is giving us the tour of this worldview?
So we had this fascinating, and for a very long time, a very controversial figure named Philo of Byblos.
Okay.
He was writing much, much later in the Roman period, around the 1st or 2nd century AD. But he made this incredibly bold claim. He claimed he wasn't writing original material at all. He said he's just translating an ancient Phoenician history written by a priest named Sanchuniathon.
Sanchuniathon, that is a mouthful.
It is. It roughly translates to something like Sakun is given, Sakun being a minor deity. And Sanchuniathon supposedly lived way, way back in the Bronze Age, maybe even before the Trojan War.
But here's the twist that I found in the reading, and this is wild. For centuries, historians just assumed Philo was a liar.
A complete fabricator, yeah.
They thought Sanchuniathon was a fictional character. Philo invented to give his own philosophical ideas some ancient street cred.
Exactly. Like writing a book today and saying, oh, I found this in an ancient tomb, when you actually wrote it in your basement last week.
Right.
It was dismissed as a pious fraud, a forgery.
Yeah.
But then the ground spoke.
I love when that happens.
In 1928, a peasant in Syria, his plow hits a stone at a place called Ras Shamra, and that led to the discovery of the ancient city of Ugarit. And when archaeologists started translating the clay tablets they found there, which dated all the way back to 1400 BCE, scholars were just stunned.
Because the names matched.
The names of the gods, the structure of the pantheon, the specific family relationships, even some of the rituals. They matched what Philo had written down 1,000 years later. He was vindicated. He really did have access to an authentic ancient tradition. And that gives us our roadmap. We can now look at Phoenician mythology, not as some garbled mess, but as a sophisticated system that validates competence, invention, and, technology.
So right, we have our source. Now let's dig into the worldview itself. Usually when we do these deep dives into ancient religions, we expect a lot of static dogma. Do this, don't do that, because the god said so 1,000 years ago. But the Phoenician worldview feels different. It feels almost fluid.
It had to be. If you're a sailor, you know that the wind changes. The currents shift. You cannot be rigid. Rigidity gets you killed. The Phoenician worldview, based on these sources, is what we call euhemeristic.
Okay, that is a $5 word. We need to break that down for the listener. Euhemerism.
Right. It's named after a Greek thinker, Euhemerus. But the Phoenicians seem to have embodied the idea much earlier. Gehemerism is the belief that the gods were originally just great humans.
So not beings from another dimension.
No. They were kings, inventors, heroes. People who were deified after their deaths because of their contributions to society.
So instead of a god coming down from a cloud and saying, here is fire, a human, some brilliant ancestor, discovers fire, and then people say, that guy was so important, his discovery was so transformative, he's a god now.
You got it. The Phoenician religion, as Encuniathon describes it, is incredibly materialistic in that sense. It validates the technites, the technician, the craftsman, the inventor. It's a religion that says, we worship the guy who invented the fishhook, rather than we worship the guy who had a mystical vision on a mountaintop.
That is surprisingly modern. It almost sounds like a kind of Silicon Valley theology. We deify the disruptors. We worship the people who invent the tools that change how we live.
It's not a bad comparison at all. It elevates the merchant and the craftsman to the divine order. In a lot of ancient societies, you think of Sparta or even early Rome, the warriors at the top, or the priest. In Phoenicia, the guy who invents a better boat or a more efficient anchor gets to be a deity.
That's a fundamental shift in what a society values.
A huge shift.
Before we get to the boats and the fishhooks, though, we have to start where every mythology starts. The beginning. The creation. And I have to say, reading through the source material on the Phoenician creation myth, it's slimy.
It is very slimy.
It's not pretty.
I was expecting, let there be light, or maybe a giant cosmic dragon being slain by a hero god. But instead we get physics and, rot.
It starts with a principle called colpius. This translates to the wind, or maybe the voice of the wind. This is the active force in the universe.
Okay, so a windy beginning.
And this wind is just sort of hanging out with bow, which is the void, or night, the passive receiver.
So we have wind and void, active and passive.
And the wind, in a very strange turn of phrase, falls in love with its own principles.
That sounds like a narcissistic wind.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It creates a mixture, a connection. This connection is called desire, or pothos in the Greek. But from this mixture, we don't get a pristine Garden of Eden. We get mot.
And mot is described in the text as mud, slime. Mud or slime, or my favorite translation, a watery putrefaction.
Putrefaction. That is a really strong word for the origin of the entire universe. It sounds gross.
It is, but think about the chemistry of it. It's fermentation. It's the compost heap. It's the idea that life doesn't come from a sterile, perfect divine command. It comes from the rot. It comes from the biological soup. And from this mot, this slime, the universe germinates.
Okay, so this is a very organic, almost scientific way of looking at it. Not very poetic.
Not at all. It's grounded in observation. And then, out of the slime, pop the stars.
Not just stars, right? The text calls them the Zophashamin.
The Zophashamin, which translates to overseers of heaven. And the source material describes them visually not as points of light, but as egg-shaped living beings.
Wait, the stars are eggs, living eggs.
Intelligent, egg-shaped beings. The mechanism described is that the air heated up and the moth, that primordial slime, burst into light. It's a thermal event. That explosion created the sun, the moon, and these intelligent, egg-shaped stars.
That sounds suspiciously like a primitive version of the Big Bang. You have a dense, chaotic soup, then heat and explosion and expansion.
It's remarkably distinct from the Babylonian or Hebrew models, which are all about divine command and separation. This is atmospheric physics. It's an observation of the natural world, fermentation, heat, wind applied to the cosmic scale. It tells you that these people were observing nature very, very closely, not just listening to priests.
So we have a universe born from wind, slime, and intelligent egg stars. Now let's bring in the gods, or, as we established, the super inventors. The genealogy here reads like a patent office registry.
It really does. This is the section Encuniathon calls the generations of the Technites. He's basically walking us through the history of human survival, but he casts us as the birth of gods.
So let's walk through these generations. Who are the first players on the board? The first inventors?
You start with Eon and Protagonist. Their great deifying contribution. They discovered that you can eat fruit from trees.
Groundbreaking. I mean, literally, that is the difference between life and death.
For early humans, realizing that colorful thing on the branch is food and won't kill me is the first most important step of survival. So they become gods for it. Then the next generation brings us foes, poor, and flocks.
Which translate to?
Light, fire, and flame. Now think about the Greek myth. Prometheus steals fire from the gods and is brutally punished for it.
Right. Knowledge is a crime.
But here, foes, Poor and flocks discover fire. They do it by rubbing sticks together. They observe the friction of trees swaying in the wind. They see it. They replicate it. They master it.
So technology is a discovery, not a theft. That seems like a crucial philosophical distinction.
It is massive. It means knowledge isn't forbidden. It's just out there, waiting to be found and applied. It's an empowering worldview.
Then we get to geography, the giants. But these aren't just like big monsters stomping around. They correspond to the actual landscape. Casius, Libanus, and Telebanus.
Yeah, Libanus is Mount Lebanon, and Telebanus is the anti-Lebanon range.
So the mountains are their giant ancestors.
Exactly. It grounds the theology right there in their homeland, in the Levant. These mountains are their family. But then we get to the guys who really matter for a maritime culture. The cultural heroes. We have Hypsiranius and Usus.
And these two are brothers, and of course they quarrel. It's a very common theme in mythology. Brothers never seem to get along.
It's a classic dynamic. Hypsiranius is the settler, the domesticator. He invents reed huts. He creates the first permanent settlement, which tradition says becomes the city of Tyre. He's the god of civilization.
But his brother, Usus, is the wild one, the innovator.
The disruptor. Usus invents clothing by skinning wild animals he's hunted. And crucially, Usus is walking by the sea after a storm. He sees a tree that's been blown down. He strips off the branches and he pushes it into the water.
The first boat.
The first boat. And the first sailor. He breaks the fundamental barrier between land and sea. He dares to float on the chaos.
But my favorite of all of these has to be Chrysaor. Because Chrysaor sounds like the ultimate angler, the patron saint of fishermen.
Chrysaor is essentially the Phoenician Hephaestus, the craftsman god. His name is sometimes translated as the opener. He invents the hook, the bait, and the fishing line. He's the first true sailor who uses technology not just to travel on the sea, but to harvest it.
And he was worshipped as a major god for this.
Absolutely.
And you see, this is what I love about this system. If you're a fisherman in ancient Tyre and you're baiting your hook at dawn, you aren't just doing a grungy everyday job. You are reenacting the divine creative act of Chrysaor. It gives dignity and cosmic significance to your labor.
It legitimizes the entire economic structure of their society. It says that your ability to manipulate the world with tools, with your hands and your mind, is what makes you godlike.
But it wasn't all just, inventing hooks and rubbing sticks together. There is some serious violent family drama in the pantheon, too. We have a castrator.
We do. And this is where it parallels the Greek myths of Cronus and Uranus so closely that it suggests a shared, very ancient origin, or at least a very old borrowing.
So who are the players?
You have the sky named Uranos in the Greek translation by Philo, and you have the earth, Ye, and they have children, but sky is oppressive. He's smothering the earth.
And one of their sons decides to do something about it. El.
He becomes the chief god, the father of years, but he starts as a revolutionary. He leads a rebellion against his father, Sky. And this is where the technology theme comes roaring back in. El doesn't just punch his dad.
No, he goes to the workshop.
He has his divine allies forge a sickle and a spear made of iron. Now, historically, the introduction of iron was a massive game changer. It was the cutting-edge tech of its day.
So El uses the hot new military tech to stage his coup.
Exactly. He uses this iron sickle to castrate his father, Sky, and drive him away from the government of the world.
Ouch. But symbolically, what does that mean? Why drive the sky away? What does that accomplish?
On one level, it represents the creation of a space for life. If the sky is constantly pressing down on the earth, nothing can grow. You need that gap between them for civilization, for agriculture, for air. But it also establishes El's character. He is a god of rigorous, sometimes violent justice. He isn't a warm, fuzzy grandfather figure. He is a hard ruler who took power by force and maintains it by force.
And speaking of force and violence, we have to talk about the sea. Because for a seafaring people, the ocean isn't just water. It isn't a highway. It's a monster.
This is the central conflict of their entire theology. The Germans have a great word for it, the Chaoskampf, the war against chaos. And for the Phoenicians, the ultimate chaos is the sea, personified as the god Yam.
Yam. Even the name sounds heavy, like a wave crashing down.
Yam represents the primordial, unbounded, chaotic water. He's described as the beloved of El, oddly enough, which suggests he's a legitimate power, but he becomes a tyrant. He represents the static, overwhelming pressure of the deep. He demands tribute from all the other gods.
He wants to rule everything.
He wants to swallow everything. And who stands up to him?
Baal, the hero. Baal Hadad, the storm god.
So it's sea versus storm. Think about the physics of that. The sea is heavy, salty, static, crushing. The storm is dynamic, active, moving. Baal brings the life-giving rain, the wind that fills the sails. He represents active kingship.
And the conflict is brutal.
It is. And once again, technology plays a decisive role. Baal doesn't just wrestle Yam to the ground. The craftsman god, the same tradition as Chrysaor, forges two magical clubs for him.
They have names, right? Like
Yeah.
magical swords and other myths.
They do. Yagrush, which means chaser, and Amur, which means driver. They are basically god-level sledgehammers. Baal smashes Yam on the skull between the eyes.
And the text says he drinks the sea. What does that even mean?
It's such a wild image. It symbolizes pushing back the chaotic waters to create dry land, to create order out of the formless deep. But, and this is the absolute key takeaway for you, if you're a Phoenician sailor, Yam is never fully killed.
He's just managed, put in his place.
He is confined. He is conquered, but he's still there. He's always there, under the surface. For a sailor, this is your daily reality. You can navigate the sea, you can survive the sea, you can even profit from the sea, but you can never, ever kill the sea. It is always waiting to rise up again. It requires constant vigilance.
That connects perfectly to that other sea monster they talk about, Lotan.
Lotan is the serpent, the fleeting serpent, the seven-headed mighty one. He is the oceanic manifestation of that deep anarchy. If you look at the Hebrew Bible, this is Leviathan. The passages in the Psalms where Yahweh crushes the heads of Leviathan are a direct echo of the older Canaanite myth of Baal smashing the heads of Lotan.
So the Phoenicians are out there on their little wooden boats, and they believe that just beneath them is a seven-headed dragon that has been beaten up but is still very much alive and very angry.
That's a terrifying thought. And that is why they needed protection on their ships, which brings us to their coins. You look at these silver coins from Tyre and Byblos, and what do you see? You see the hippocampus, the horsefish hybrid,
Like a mythological seahorse?
but a powerful, monstrous seahorse. And usually, the god Melkart is riding it, taming it. It's a talisman. It's a piece of propaganda. It says, our god rides the waves. Our currency is backed by the guy who tamed the sea monster. It's economic confidence built on theological dominance.
Speaking of Melkart, let's go to his city, Tyre. This place was the metropolis of the Mediterranean for centuries. It was the New York or London of the Iron Age, and its founding myth is, well, it's trippy. It involves floating islands.
The Ambrosian rocks. The myth says that originally Tyre wasn't on land at all. It was built on two floating, wandering rocks out in the sea.
Like tumbleweeds of the ocean, that's not a very stable foundation for a city.
Not at all. And on these rocks, there was an olive tree that burned with a magical fire but was never consumed. In the branches of the tree sat an eagle, and coiled at the base of the trunk was a serpent.
Okay, that is a lot of symbolism packed into one tree. Fire, bird, snake.
It's a cosmic axis. And Melkart, whose name means king of the city, told the first humans that if they wanted to settle there, if they wanted a home, they had to catch the eagle and sacrifice it.
And when they did that,
The moment the eagle's blood touched the rocks, they stopped moving. They rooted themselves to the seabed. They became stable.
so sacrifice stabilizes the earth. That seems to be a recurring theme.
That is the core message. The world is naturally unstable. It's floating, drifting, chaotic. But through ritual, through sacrifice, and implicitly through engineering and effort, you can root it. You can make it stable enough to build a civilization on.
And once they stabilized the city, they found something on the beach that made them fabulously wealthy. The dog and the snail. This is one of the most famous stories to come out of the ancient world.
The discovery of Tyrian purple. The legend says Melkart was walking on the beach with a nymph he was courting named Tyros, and his dog was with them. The dog, being a dog, started chewing on a murex snail that had washed ashore.
And came up looking like he was wearing lipstick.
His mouth was stained this brilliant, deep purple. The nymph Tyros saw it and basically said, I want to dress that color, or I'm not hanging out with you anymore.
High maintenance, but effective.
Very effective. So Melkart, to please her, gathered up thousands of these snails and figured out how to extract the dye and color the first garment. It's what we call a charter myth. By saying their patron god discovered the dye, the city of Tyre was claiming a divine monopoly.
We didn't just figure this out. God gave this industry exclusively to us.
And they built an empire on that snail mucus. For centuries, that dye was worth more than its weight in gold.
But Melkart wasn't just a divine fashion designer. He was a dying and rising god. Which brings us to the actual rituals. The agursis.
The agursis, it means the awakening. Melkart was a solar deity connected to the cycles of the seasons. In the winter, or at the end of a great cycle, he had to die to lose his power.
How did they enact this ritual? What did they actually do?
They would build a giant pyre. sometimes even on a raft set out to sea. They would place an effigy of the god on it and burn it. This symbolized his descent into the underworld, or his consumption by the forces of death and fire. And then the entire city would mourn.
A citywide funeral for their god?
Yes, funeral banquets, public weeping, rites of lamentation. But then on the third day,
He wakes up.
the awakening. The high priestess, representing the goddess Astarte, and the king of Tyre, representing Melkart, would likely engage in a hieros gamos, a sacred marriage ritual. By uniting, they would magically jumpstart the fertility of the world for the new year.
You know, there's that famous scene in the Bible with the prophet Elijah on Mount Carmel. He's having a showdown with the priests of Baal, and their God isn't answering them. And Elijah starts mocking them. He says, "Shout louder! Maybe he's sleeping and needs to be awakened."
That is a direct surgical burn. Elijah knew their theology better than most people do today. He was referencing the agursis. He was saying, oh, is your God taking his annual nap? Do you need to do the whole waking up ritual? It shows how well known these rites were across the ancient Near East.
Now, if we move up the coast from Tyre to Byblos, the vibe changes a little bit. It seems less about burning gods on pyres and more about anchors.
Byblos was an older city and deeply, deeply connected to Egypt. Their main goddess was Balat Jabal, which just means the Lady of Byblos. And she was syncretized or blended with the Egyptian goddess Hathor and later Isis.
But the anchors, I read that archaeologists found stone anchors inside her temples.
Yes, dozens of them. And you have to think, for a sailor, what is an anchor? It's your last line of defense. If the storm is raging and you are drifting toward the rocks, the anchor is the only piece of technology saving your life, your cargo, your ship.
So instead of lighting a candle, they would dedicate a massive stone anchor in the temple.
It's so practical. It's physically anchoring their safety in the divine realm.
Right.
It's a votive offering. Thank you for saving us. Or, please save us on our next voyage. We've even found a whole deposit of Bronze Age anchors at a specific reef offshore, a place called Daret Martin. It seems to have been a sacred anchorage where you drop a votive anchor to thank the goddess for safe passage before coming into port.
That is so tangible. Here, goddess, hold this for me.
Exactly.
We've talked about the gods dying and being reborn, but what about the humans? Phoenician sailors had a very specific and kind of sad relationship with death at sea.
It was a huge taboo. The prophet Ezekiel mentions this silence. You could not mourn on the ship.
Why? Was it considered bad luck? A chinks.
Purity and luck, yeah. The ship is a fragile bubble of order and life in the midst of chaos. You cannot invite death on board as a passenger by acknowledging it. If a crewmate was washed overboard or died in an accident, you had to be silent. You couldn't perform the proper rites.
That sounds psychologically incredibly difficult. You lose your friend to a storm, and you just have to keep working in silence with the rest of the crew.
Until you got home. Then, the families would often build cenotaphs, empty tombs. And in those tombs, or in the tombs of people who died on land, they would bury these beautiful model ships.
Like toy boats.
Detailed clay models of their trading vessels. The idea was to provide a vessel for the soul to travel to the afterlife, especially if the physical body was lost in the ocean.
That's beautiful and haunting. And speaking of haunting, we have the cult of Adonis, which was also centered in Byblos.
Adonis is the Greek version of the Semitic title Adon, which just means Lord. The myth says he was a beautiful young hunter, loved by the goddess, who was killed by a wild boar in the mountains above the city.
And there is a river there, the Nar Ibrahim. In the spring, the melting snow washes red, iron oxide-rich soil from the mountains into the river, turning the water blood red.
And the ancients believed that was his actual blood. The river ran with the blood of the dying god. It's another dying and rising cycle, deeply connected to the land and the seasons. And it has strong parallels to the Egyptian myth of Osiris, whose body was said to have washed ashore at Byblos.
But now we have to go to the dark place, the most controversial part of this whole culture. We have to talk about the Mulk.
The Tophet, yeah.
For a long time, many scholars and apologists said this was just propaganda. You know, oh, those evil Carthaginians, they sacrifice babies, Roman slander. But the archaeology, it tells a different story, doesn't it?
It does. We have to face the evidence squarely.
Yeah.
Excavations at Carthage in Tunisia, at Mocha in Sicily, at Theros in Sardinia, all Punic colonies, have found these open-air sanctuaries filled with thousands of urns. And inside those urns are the cremated bones of newborn infants and animals.
And there was that pivotal study from Oxford in 2014. What did that prove?
It was a game changer. Skeptics used to argue that these were just cemeteries for stillborn babies or infants who died of natural causes. But the Oxford team analyzed the bones and found that the vast majority of these infants were healthy at the time of death. They were mostly between 0 and 6 months old. This wasn't a hospital ward, it was a sacrificial site.
So it was real. They were sacrificing their children. The next question is, why? How does a society justify that to itself?
We have to step back from our modern revulsion and try to understand the logic of the theology. And it goes right back to the top, to El, the chief god we talked about earlier.
The one with the sickle, the castrator.
That's him. The mythology, according to Philo, says that during a time of great plague and cosmic danger, El himself sacrificed his only son, Yud, as a whole burnt offering to save the rest of creation.
So the god set the precedent. He did it first.
Exactly. It established the Mulk sacrifice as the ultimate tool to save the community. And we need to be precise with the terms here. For a long time, people thought Moloch was the name of a fiery demon god, but Mulk is the technical term for the offering type itself.
So what are the different types?
There is Mulk Mor, which is the sacrifice of a lamb, often as a substitute, and then there is Mulk Adam, which is the sacrifice of a human.
So they had a substitution system. They could offer a lamb instead.
They did. And most of the time, they probably used the lamb.
Yeah.
The sheer number of animal bones confirms that. But when the stakes were at their absolute highest, when the city was under siege by the Romans, when a plague was rampant, when the entire state was about to collapse, the lamb wasn't enough. You had to escalate. You had to offer the Mulk Adam.
It's a kind of horrifying transactional anxiety. I give you the most precious thing I have, the future of my family line, so that you don't destroy my city.
That's the logic. The inscriptions on the monuments rarely mention death or mourning. They use votive language. Phrases like, "To the Lady Tanit and the Lord Baal Hammon, because he heard his voice, he blessed him." It was a vow, a needer. A parent would promise their fruit, their child, in exchange for a massive favor, a safe trading voyage, the end of a siege, a huge business deal.
And when the favor was granted, the bill came due.
And they paid it. We even see this visually on the Pozo Moro relief, an Iberian monument from a Phoenician-influenced area in Spain. It shows a two-headed demon or god holding a bowl with a child in it next to a creature that's devouring human limbs. It's graphic, but it confirms the literary and archaeological sources.
It's chilling, but it emphasizes that point you made earlier. The cosmos is dangerous, and you have to pay a very high price to survive in it.
And in the West, in Carthage, this practice seems to have become even more prominent as the center of Phoenician power shifted away from Tyre. The gods changed too. Melkart faded into the background, and two new figures rose up to dominate, Baal Hammon and Tanit.
Baal Hammon. He's the one most associated with the sacrifice, right?
Yes. His name means Lord of the Brazier, or Lord of the Incense Altar. He was identified by the Greeks with Cronus and the Romans with Saturn, who, remember, is the mythic father who ate his own children. He's a solar vegetative god, a powerful, stern, elder figure.
And Tanit. She's the mysterious one. Her symbol is everywhere in Carthage.
Tanit is fascinating. She's often called Tanit Pene Baal, which means Tanit, the face of Baal.
What does that even mean, the face of Baal?
It could mean she is the manifestation of his will or his active presence in the world. But she became incredibly popular in her own right, maybe even eclipsing him. You see her symbol everywhere, the sign of Tanit.
It looks like a little stick figure, doesn't it? A triangle for the body, a horizontal line for the arms, and a circle for the head.
Exactly. A triangle, a bar, and a circle. It's ubiquitous in Punic sites. It might be a stylized woman with her arms raised, or it might be an altar with a sacred stone on top. We're not entirely sure. But she becomes the great protector of Carthage in the West.
Speaking of protection, let's go back to the ships for a second, because the Carthaginians had these things on their warships called pataikoi. And honestly, they sound like early action figures.
They were dwarf gods. Herodotus, the Greek historian, describes them. Phoenician ships carried these figureheads or little statues that looked like the Egyptian dwarf god Ta-Sokar. They were small, ugly, and fierce-looking.
Why would you put an ugly dwarf on the prow of your ship?
To scare the demons.
Right.
They were apotropaic, the averted evil. But they were also craftsman gods, like Ta. So they represented the power of technological skill shipbuilding, navigation, metalworking over the brute, chaotic force of nature. It's the idea that cleverness and intelligence embodied by the dwarf can outsmart the giant monster of the sea.
That is a great metaphor. Brains over brawn.
It's the story of Phoenicia in a nutshell. A tiny group of people on a small strip of coast who outsmarted the ocean.
But eventually, their luck ran out. Their cities fell. Tyre was besieged by Alexander the Great. Carthage was utterly destroyed by Rome. What happened to the gods? Did they just vanish into smoke and ash?
No. They did what Phoenicians always did. They adapted, They survived, they traded their names.
The ultimate rebrand.
It was. Melkart became Heracles. Herodotus actually went to Tyre and said the cult of Heracles there was much older than the Greek one. So every time you see Hercules in a movie, you're seeing a distant shadow of the god of Tyre.
And Balhaman, the lord of the brazier.
He became Saturn. The Romans adopted him as Saturnus Africanus, the African Saturn, and his cult remained powerful in North Africa for centuries.
Is candidate.
She became Juno Celestis, the heavenly Juno. She was a major deity in the Roman Empire, worshipped from Britain to the Danube, well into the Christian era. The gods didn't die, they just changed their business cards.
But their biggest, most enduring legacy isn't really the gods, it's the alphabet.
It is the ultimate irony, isn't it? Their greatest invention, the phonetic alphabet, the ancestor of our own, was so efficient and so successful that everyone adopted it. The Greeks, the Etruscans, the Romans, us. But because everyone adopted it, the specific Phoenician voice got drowned out. They became the medium, not the message.
And their other great invention, the use of papyrus, rotted away.
Exactly. The most durable legacy and the most fragile medium. A tragic combination.
I want to talk about one specific shipwreck before we wrap up, the one found at Bajo de la Campana, because this really brings the whole thing home for me.
This was a ship from the 7th century BCE, found off the coast of Spain. An incredible discovery. And when they excavated it, they realized the ship itself was essentially a floating temple.
A floating temple? How so?
They found a stone altar on board, among the wreckage of the cargo.
So they were actively performing rituals, making sacrifices, while sailing across the Mediterranean.
Burning incense, pouring libations, for sure. And the cargo. It included a set of elephant tusks, raw ivory that were inscribed with Phoenician names and dedications like a blessing for Eshmunkalats. These were clearly votive gifts being delivered from the east to a temple or a shrine in the west.
So the religion wasn't just in the city temples. It was exported, it was physical, it was literally moving across the water with the trade goods.
Precisely. They were exporting their gods right alongside their wine and oil and timber. The ship was a sacred space.
So when we look at the big picture here, this purple horizon, what is the final takeaway? What's the core of this worldview?
I think the takeaway is that Phoenician religion was, at its heart, a business deal with the universe.
A transaction.
A profound and deadly serious transaction. Their cities were these precarious ledges on the coast. Their ships were tiny specks of wood in a chaotic, monster-filled sea. They didn't view the gods as distant, moral arbiters in the way we might today. They viewed them as active partners.
Silent partner.
Oh, no, active partners. Partners who demanded investment and expected a return. You pay Melkart with the Ingursus festival, and he stabilizes the city for another year. You pay Balat Gabal with a stone anchor, and she holds your ship steady in the storm.
And you pay Balhaman with the ultimate price, and he saves the entire community from total collapse.
From the high theology of wind and slime to the grim, dutiful ashes of the Tophet, it was all a system. It was all an attempt to stabilize a profoundly dangerous and unstable world.
A sacred technology for survival.
And considering they dominated the trade of the Mediterranean for 1,000 years, for a long time it worked.
That is a powerful thought. The gods as active partners in the business of civilization.
Well, that is all the time we have for on this deep dive into the Phoenician mysteries. It really makes you look at the ocean, and maybe even the alphabet you're using to text your friends a little differently.
It certainly does. A ghost that taught us all how to write.
If you enjoyed this journey into the lost worlds of the Mediterranean, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more. We have plenty of other deep dives coming your way. Thanks for listening.